folks here, and we're going to be talking about civic information needs for Black and Latino newsrooms. We have Frank Santos, who is a journalist and digital designer for Black New Jersey, residing from Camden, New Jersey, so whoop whoop to our Camden folks. We have Mark Tyler, from founder and publisher of Atlanta City Focus, and then we have Vanessa Marie Grable, who works for Free Press, who will be leading our conversation for today. So thank you, and Marie, Vanessa, you can take it away.
Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? I know it's the after lunchtime lull, so please do keep eating and all of that, and we'll try to entertain you during the lunchtime hour. My name is Vanessa Maria Graber, and I am the Director of Journalism and Media Education at Free Press. And Free Press is a national media and tech advocacy organization. And before we get into our panel, I just want to talk a little bit about Free Press's history here in New Jersey. Back in about 2016, 2017, we started a News Voices project where we held town halls across the state of New Jersey. We started out in Atlantic City, where Mark and Raymond Tyler, his brother, were at. And we had one in Camden, we had one in, I believe, the New Brunswick area, Asbury Park. And during this time, we asked people what their information needs were, and who and what was missing from the media. And overwhelmingly, Black and Latinx people across the state of New Jersey said they were underrepresented in the media. That the coverage that they got, a lot of it was from New York and Philadelphia. A lot of it was racist. A lot of it was just crime coverage or weather events. And that they didn't really know what was happening in their local communities, especially with regards to what was happening with their local governments. People felt as though the local politicians, wait, the assemblyman's gone, right? Now, they felt that they were passing laws, no, he knows this. They felt people were passing laws and ordinances that were harmful to their communities, and they were finding out much later after the fact when they couldn't do anything about it. They also felt as though the governor at the time, Chris Christie, was doing a lot of bad things, with the budget and cutting programs and services. And basically there was no journalists or accountability organizations that were making the public aware of these things. And so that was one of the big takeaways from that organizing effort. And when we asked people, what can we do to solve this problem, they also overwhelmingly said, we need our own media. We need not just to have more independent media outlets, we need to own and operate them and control the narrative, because the ability to tell our own stories and report on our own communities with respect and dignity and accuracy is really, really vital to our liberation and our quality of life. And so we also brainstormed with these same folks across the state, what could be done? And people came up with the idea to pass legislation to fund local journalism. And from that, Free Press helped draft the Civic Information Bill. We passed that bill with Assemblyman Lou Greenwald and many others, and that led to the creation of the Civic Information Consortium. So I just want to remind people that this was a community-driven effort, and that we were able to win this achievement by organizing. And when we organize, we win. And we need to do that right now because the budget is out and the governor, unfortunately, is proposing to zero out the budget for the consortium. And I strongly believe that we can overcome this by organizing, by using our new media outlets to remind people of how important local news is, by making phone calls, by tweeting, by emailing, and doing all the things that we did to pass this bill. We already have a model for success, and we just need to get back out there and do it again. So on your tables, you have an information sheet. Britt, if you don't mind holding it up. There is a QR code there on the bottom left hand, and that will take you to a free press page where you can send an email to the governor and to the Senate and Assembly Budget Committee leaders. And so I would encourage you not to leave here today without filling out that form and sending a united message from this group that we need to maintain those funds. And not only do we need $3 million, we need much more resources than that. And so, again, I tell that story because I believe that we can win this. And I think that we are the most important voices in this movement for local news. So, part of what we're doing today is going back to our roots, right? Talking about the information needs of our communities. And with me, I have two amazing local news providers and journalists who dedicate their time to making sure their communities are informed and doing it in a way that is responsive to the ways that their communities communicate, right? And so right now, when we talk about civic information, a lot of people tend to think about elections, right? So we just had a presidential election. There was a lot of focus and energy on that. And there's a lot of funding that goes towards election coverage. But what about the in-between, right? The months in the year when people are not organizing around elections. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to do civic journalism during times that we're not trying to elect people, and what civic journalism actually means. It goes beyond election coverage, right? It's giving people information about public resources. It's letting people know what types of laws are being passed, budgets are being passed, what their local mayors are doing, right? What their city councils are doing, what their school boards are doing, and talking a lot, especially with immigrant communities, about the very rapidly changing landscape around immigration law and policy. So with that, I want to toss it to my friend and colleague, Mark Tyler, who is the founder, editor, and publisher of Atlantic City Focus. And I love telling the story about our beginnings because in a way we've come full circle to when we first had that meeting at the Noise Arts Garage, when we talked about we need our own media and building the Civic Information Consortium, and now founding a local newspaper and media site in Atlantic City. So honestly, when we came together, that was the dream, right? And now we're here, so tell us all about it.
Well, first things first, I want to say how honored and how privileged I feel to be in a room with so many valued news people. This is just extraordinary because the work that we are all doing individually and collectively is important. And this doesn't happen on a regular given day. So first things first, I'm honored and I'm humbled just to be here in the presence of you all. Now, my name is Mark Tyler. I am the founder and publisher of Atlantic City Focus, which Vanessa said. And when we started, our vision was to create a safe space where residents and natives could tell their own stories in their own way. We promote civic engagement, but we also promote African American culture, history, and tradition. And when we do it correctly, the stories that we tell are going to enlighten, engage, and inform. And that was the genesis of Atlantic City Focus. It actually started for me long before that meeting at the Noise, because it was a recurring dream I had as a sophomore in college. I would and I would see the logo, Atlantic City Focus, which is important to you, it's important to us. And so this has been a 30-plus year journey getting it from my mind into reality. And when I first thought about it, there was no consortium. There was no thought of money or how to do it. It was an idea, and then the idea eventually caught up with the money, or the money caught up with the idea, however you look at it.
I'm gonna interrupt. I also host a weekly radio show, so I'm gonna get into like radio show.
Okay.
And shout out to Raymond over here, who also does a show at our station, WPPM. Tell us a little bit about some of the types of news content you provide and why you decided to focus on those issues.
Okay, so some of the news content that we provide. Atlantic City is very unique in that we are a smaller city with an international date line. And so if you remember when Assemblyman Greenwald was speaking, he talked about Abscan, the far-reaching investigation that kind of set square in Atlantic City on our mayor at that time. And many people look to gravitate towards anything that is bad that is happening in Atlantic City. Our politicians have had a history of making some mistakes and so on and so forth. And so initially people look for that. They look for the murders, they look for the fires. And that's the totality of what they focus on and concentrate on. But the reality is, in addition to those things which do happen, there are good people who are doing good work in Atlantic City. And when we did our focus groups, people said, listen, we like your idea, but can you tell us some of the good things that are happening in the community? And I said, absolutely. We will absolutely make a commitment to tell some of the good things that are happening in the community. And we've done that. And as a result of that, our community has gotten behind us and they support our work. And I think that is the best compliment that the community could ever get.
Yeah, we get that a lot in the Camden area, right? Where it's like people don't also see all of the amazing organizing, the artwork, the beautification that happens in Camden. And for a while, it was just the Courier Post and the Inquirer doing stories. Now there's a lot more, podcasters and YouTubers, influencers, and storytelling projects. But there's still a major need, right? So, Luis, you are in the Camden area. Frank Santos. You are an organizer. You are a designer. And you also are a journalist with Black in New Jersey and with Frontrunner New Jersey. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do and what the scene is like in Camden in terms of serving people's or meeting people's information needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My name is Frank Santos. Well, first, I am and have started in the journalism world through the South Jersey Information Equity Project, which is funded by the Center for Cooperative Media, so shout out to them. But this is my second year with them, and their goal is to cover news deserts in South Jersey. So when I'm born and raised in Camden, so that counts as a news desert, but I'm also assigned to Salem County. So we're finding connective threads as far as with a lot of these spaces, including Burlington County and other news deserts in New Jersey. But a lot of it has to do with environmental racism, a lot of things that are overlooked that goes on in city, with city council members and things like that. So that landscape of discovery feels explosive a little bit because I know that there's not a lot of people that look like me or in my age range that are really trying to go out there on their own time and try to find these stories and ruffle a few feathers. So, yeah, is this the part where you want me to introduce some of my work as well? Okay. The reason why I feel a little awkward about that is because I've had to learn how to navigate it in new ways, especially because I think we can all sense the heavy weight of apathy within people who are even concerned about a lot of injustices in the world. So with that being said, as far as my work with the South Jersey Information Equity Project, I do write for Clyde's Frontrunner New Jersey, Tennyson, Donier, Coleman's Black in Jersey, and they have championed me and encouraged me to think a little bit outside of the box. So my background in multimedia work, graphic design, video editing, evolved into working with nonprofits in Camden and New Jersey, and then I saw the bigger need of honestly just better communication skills of the journalism world, right? Especially in a world where we're leaning towards 600 to a couple thousand words, which isn't always accessible to folks. So I'll give you an example of one of my videos. If you don't mind, sir, the Frank 1 video, we'll play it real quick, and these will all be short. Can you just let it rock with the volume on, please?
A Camden metal recycling plant fired forced residents indoors and some were even evacuated to nearby hotels due to toxic air quality levels. This isn't the first or second fire in recent years, and even though the shelter-in-place requests were lifted at noon on Saturday, people in Camden and Philly are worried for their health.
This happens like once a year now. It's crazy, right?
EMR, the UK-based company that owns the site, last posted on socials on Friday, hasn't made a statement since the fire, and still hasn't responded to our calls, even though the business is still open. My name's Frank. For more stories like this, tap in with Black in Jersey.
And before we play the second video, and there's a third video I'd especially like to share, what this ignited for me, wow, sorry, I guess corny pun was not intended, but really it showed me and taught me the need of my community for just an information source. And I quickly became that. All types of people from different backgrounds and organizations, especially residents, reached out to me when there were publications trying to interview them. They told me that they'd rather speak to me because I'm on the ground and they saw that I was there the day after and that instilled confidence with them, which then led me to be a part of the forming of a coalition in response to the EMR fire, which we then we attended a city council meeting last week on it where they were proposing an ordinance about it. Long story short, they're just trying to scapegoat batteries when it's really EMR's responsibility. But if we could play the second video, and we'll pause it in between because I can tell we're in a smart room and you'll get the picture of this second video. And I'll skip to the third video after, and I'll just give you some context as far as it's okay to laugh, okay? So play this second video real quick. Just captions are essential, right? Accessibility is key. And this is just a recap of this city council meeting.
Blaming
They
these
did not
fires for
respond to
being the
this.
main problem behind these consistent fires is like a chef blaming the stove for burning the food. EMR USA is the chef behind 6 toxic fires so far in Camden. 2 fires in 2022 alone.
Okay, you can pause that
And in
one.
29
There you go. We've seen this time and time again. And I entered that room that day knowing that there's a part of me that if I was in middle school or high school, I'd be in the back of the room saying, boring! And I wanted to combat that. And I think it's important for us to kind of sit with that sentiment because that's a real thing. And apathy is just one of the layers that creates this. So I finished that little speech and the proposition of meeting with the CEO and all that good important stuff, but I decided to put a little twist on it. Just because I think Black and brown people especially are really great at finding comedy within tragedy. So if you don't mind playing the third video, the end of my speech.
But I won't try to put you in a hot seat today. I'd rather end my comments by sharing a written piece by 1900s poet Cornell Haynes Jr. I was like, good gracious, bodacious, flirtatious, trying to show faces, looking for the right time to
These are real reactions too.
looking for the
That is City Councilman Arthur Barkley Sleep. Yes.
Me and the rest of my heathens, check it, got me locked up at the top of the Four Seasons. Pentecost, boom, there's nothing up my sleeve. No teasing. I need you, Fuentes, to pick up that phone up there. Give the people what we asking for. Cause I feel like busting loose, and I feel like touching you. I can't feel like stopping juice. So please tell me what to do. And get me out of here. Thank you.
Well, that was awkward. But I'm learning to find comfort within the discomfort, especially when in journalism, I would argue that a comfort zone is writing just an article. So that's a little bit about my work, but yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about the thank you for sharing
Thank you.
Clearly you have a target audience in mind, right? And you ended by saying our comfort zone is writing articles. Tell us why you chose that medium and who you're trying to bring this message to.
Yeah, well, I think that with what medium I am trying to use, and I come from a background in graphic design, video editing, so naturally people would love to pin the digital media coordinator job or position or title on me, and quite honestly, that's the responsibility of everyone here, to be a truly knowledgeable digital media coordinator, especially with, even in that post, that original video of just me explaining the EMR fire, I actually tested a couple different posts, and the most successful one was the one where the cover image had the fires on it. And I think the understanding of SEO, search engine optimization and things like that, is something that we really have to lean into. But as far as the people that I'm trying to reach, quite honestly, I'm trying to reach people that are not naturally involved in the world of civics, community work, and are even apathetic to politics. If anything, that is my target audience, because I know that if I can reach the person that's really trying to not watch the news, or, everybody knows the person, I don't watch the news, oh, so tired of the news. If I can tap in with that person, everybody else will follow. Everybody else might already be there anyways. So with that, I'm learning how to navigate accessible video content, explainer content, educational content, and if you guys notice, those were all less than 60 seconds, which is also important because one of the core people that a lot of us in this country have missed out on is the working class, who are naturally time constrained because of socioeconomic circumstances.
Yeah, it's so important for us to develop a social media presence, and young people, especially if you teach college students or high school students, they have information needs too, but they're not paying for subscriptions, they're not going online to news, they're not picking up newspapers. So being able to tap into, TikTok and Instagram and even Snapchat to be able to post your content, and using humor, right, and music is definitely another way to reach that population. So thank you for sharing that, and I hope y'all are inspired to make some fun videos. And let me tell you, as someone who covers city council in Philly, these meetings are dreadfully boring, and they're rough, and every now and again, you get 5 minutes of some action or some drama. So shout out to all the people that sit through those meetings, and the documenters from City Bureau and beyond who do that work, taking notes and letting people know what's going on, because there are actually so many meetings across New Jersey where there's nobody going there, and they're making all sorts of decisions and nobody knows about it. So Mark, I want to go back to you and your community engagement guide, which is a really amazing product, and you chose to print this engagement guide. Tell us about the guide and why you decided to do it in print and digital format.
Okay, so the Civic Engagement Guide can be found on our website, and it's right in our nav bar. Essentially, we do this because as we were talking to the community, one of the most troubling concerns was that people said, you know what, it takes us 45 minutes to search all of these different websites online to find the person who we need to talk to. So I said, you know what, if we don't do anything else, we are going to complete our civic engagement guide. Then as we begin to go out into the community, we found that others had tried to do it before and failed. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a guide so that if they needed to get to someone on city council, on the Board of Education, at the Attorney General's office, at all of these various areas, they could go and find all of this information right on our site. We printed it out, we print 10,000 copies that go out to the senior citizen buildings because they're the ones who really gravitate towards print more. And then we have a flippable PDF on our website. Then we did another focus group. And here's where I got my feelings hurt. Because I'm pumped, right? Because we did it. Everybody else failed. Yeah, hey! And what the young people said is, this is nice, but can you make it into a searchable database app that I can access on my phone? And I said, yes, that is possible. So we, in effect, I said, so now I'm getting interested. So would you like us to scrap what we have? Is that the conversation we're having? Get rid of this beautiful thing, right, that we created? Get rid of it? No, don't get rid of it. Just, you can keep it, but give us more. And I think that's the scariest thing you can ever hear in a focus group is give us more, right? Because you've already kind of left it all on the court, right? But now you got to get something back. And you got to find a way to give us more. And we've done that. And we are doing that. And that's something we are exceedingly proud of. We are partnering with a group called Empowerment Tools Coalition because they help us with our civic engagement. And as we were sitting in this room together, we said, you know what, we've been thinking about this they had been thinking about it for a long time. They didn't have any money. They said, I started something like this before, and I said, well, yeah, I've thought about it before. So then we had to go out of that room, go back to the drawing board, and we have already reached critical completion. But it's not just the civic engagement guide, right? It is a list of resources. It is a database of resources where people can figure out, hey, who's doing housing? Who are the organizations that are doing mental health? Who are the organizations that are doing food distribution? Where can I go if I need rent assistance? And so there are all these different categories that we're putting together so that people can get this information that they so desperately need. And we're just about finished with it. So that makes me very proud that when we launched this on the website and on the app, it comes not necessarily because we were kicking around the idea. It comes because we had the courage to go into a room and have our community tell us what they wanted and not praise us for what we were giving them. And that's the hard work. And that's how we continue to move forward. And I think that's what's going to take out the work that we do farther into the 21st century.
Thank you for sharing that because again, you gotta meet people where they are, right? You gotta continually ask them. And what I find sometimes about our communities is that what they wanted a couple months ago is not what they want today, right? And when we heard from our earlier speaker who said, oh, I made this presentation in January, but now we're here, right? And so I think about when we first talked about this presentation in February, January, February, and now so much has changed with federal policy, right? So you're constantly having to ask and be responsive to the needs of the community. Like in 2020, right, like none of us were public health journalists, and yet we found ourselves researching all the scientific information and trying to provide people with information. Although Free Press did info needs surveys across the state in Newark, Atlantic City, and Camden, and in each of those places, people said that they wanted information about economic resources and food, right? And I think that with the way the economy is now, like that's still true, although we have to still keep asking people, right? And I think, when you talked about in Camden, the environmental racism part, a lot of people don't know that across the state of New Jersey, in places like Camden and Newark, and beach communities, shore communities, that there are a lot of issues that are underreported that actually impact people's health. And so in Camden, for example, it has one of the nation's highest rates of pediatric asthma. There's one of the highest rates of emergency department visits. And a lot of those are environmental, right? Because the air is polluted, because places like EMR are violating a lot of these environmental things. And so we don't normally think about environmental stories or public health stories as civic journalism, but it is, right? It is very important to communicate to people how these things impact them, but also how they can get resources. So I'm going to do a shameless plug. So for our newsroom, so in addition to working at Free Press and Free Press Action, last year I became the co-owner of a local news cooperative called the Philadelphia Hall Monitor. Because we are a Press Forward grantee, so shout out to Press Forward. And we were a volunteer operation since 2016. On WPPM, a community radio station I co-founded in Philadelphia, and the PPM is for People Powered News. But we did it as volunteers for a really long time, and we decided to form a worker-owned news cooperative, inspired by some of the folks in this room. And we cover exclusively local government, we quote-unquote monitor City Hall, but we also cover all sorts of other community issues. So when I'm not working at Free Press on the nights and the weekends, I go to a lot of protests, rallies, I go to town halls, I go to community meetings, and I'm not always there to report on a story. I'm there to just listen and understand what people are talking about. I ask people what information they need. And so right now we're in the throes of budgeting for the city of Philadelphia.